Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce Legislative Coffee for April 2022. Our fearless leader, John Cohen, is gone today, so today we are a poor representative for John Cohen, but I am joined with Lewis Reed, and we want to welcome everyone who is here in the audience today. Likewise, those individuals who may be watching via social media or rewatching. So today we are going to start out. It'll be just a little bit different than it is normally. We just certainly want to thank everyone who has sponsored this event, although I don't have a list of sponsors, and so it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate you, it just I don't have that list. So we want to start out by giving our legislators, because they don't have name tags, if you don't know them, a chance just to quickly introduce themselves. And we're going to start out with our first question, which is, since our last legislative coffee, both the Kansas House and Senate maps have been released and passed the Kansas legislature. Could you please tell us who you are, tell us about your new district, and give us your thoughts on those maps? And you know what? I'm going to let whoever would like to go first may go first.
Yeah, well, good morning, everybody. These guys are kind. I'm Karen Tyson, Senator Tyson. I represent the 12th Senate District. Currently, that district is Franklin, Allen, Anderson, Southern Miami, Lynn, and Northern Bourbon. Interestingly, the Senate maps did change considerably for this district. It didn't need to, but it did. In fact, they drew Representative Finch and Representative Samsel both out of the Senate district. I did not support the map for several reasons. That was partial. They split Franklin County, put a little bit more of Miami County in, and added Wilson, Neosho, and no, not Neosho, Wilson. I have to go down in my mind. Wilson, Woodson, and Coffee counties all added to the 12th district. And they removed Bourbon County. So it's now an 8-county Senate district instead of 6. The House maps I did not support either. If you looked at it, there were so many issues with that map. I just felt like, I know the House worked hard. They had I would say, a better process than the Senate did, but I didn't agree with either of the final maps that were drawn, trying to protect my district and who's representing us.
Good morning, Mark Samsel from the 5th District. It's got about half of Franklin County, most of Anderson County, a little bit of Lynn County, and part of Miami County. Must have made Senator Tyson mad. That's how we didn't end up in the same district moving forward. But
I asked for you guys.
No, I'm kidding. No, I'm light humor this morning as my coffee kicks in still. But the district, the process in the House, at least, I can't speak to the Senate. I wasn't involved in that one, but I think that's something that all Kansans can be really proud of on the House side. It started at first with mostly Republican support, but Republicans worked with Democrats across the aisle. And by the time that thing got finished, it had overwhelming support from both the Democrats and the Republicans when it passed the House, went over to the Senate. And hopefully the governor will sign that one, but that's where it's at right now. The district, as Senator Tyson alluded to a little bit, with population shifts towards Johnson County, not real surprising. It's moving north. So I'll let Blaine talk about his district a little bit, but the new district for House District 5 would move north into Douglas County, the rural parts of Douglas County. So that would be a first representing Douglas County. Same with Johnson County. It picks up the Edgerton area and even a little bit up towards Gardner along the interstate, and then pushes up towards the western edge of Spring Hill. So, and then it retains most of the same parts of Miami County, and not all of Osawatomie anymore, but parts of it. Osawatomie State Hospital would move into Samantha Potter's district, and then it has the northeastern corner of Franklin County would be the new district map if it's approved.
Good morning, I'm Blaine Finch. I represent the 59th House District. Currently that is part of Franklin County and part of Osage County. The new proposed 59 is all of Franklin County except the township around Wellsville. So it basically would be a county district here in Franklin County on the House side. I will echo the comments from Representative Samsel on the House maps. When the House maps were presented on the House floor, the ranking minority member, Tom Burrows from Wyandotte County, came down and was effusive in his praise of the chairman, Chris Croft, and the process that the House had used to come up with its maps. So they were very bipartisan. They were very well supported in the House chamber. I don't like our Senate map. You know, on the one hand, we have a new congressional map that moves Franklin County towards the metro area, which I think is really our community of interest. I think that's where the future of Franklin County is at, with the intermodal, with economic development. I think we have much more in common there than we do going west to Osage County or northwest to Shawnee County, which is our new district. We don't have as much in common there. And having served Franklin and Osage counties for a decade now, I can tell you that the priorities are different. Where they're at in terms of development and growth are different. Where they're aligned in terms of their their resource areas, where they draw employees from, and where their employees go to work is different. And they're just, that's not the direction that the Senate district should have gone, in my mind. And we have much more in common with our neighbors to the northeast and east than we do going west. And that's nothing against them; they're great people, but it's a different direction. It's a different community of interest, I think, than what we've seen before. So I was disappointed to see the Senate map kind of do an about face from everything else that we've been working on in both the congressional level and the House maps.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you. We will, as always, we will certainly take questions from the audience. Here in just a couple minutes, we're going to start out with just a couple more questions, and then I think Lewis is going to handle the microphone, and we used to have these elaborate rules about the microphone, but I'm not sure that anybody's going to run away with the microphone, and if you do, I'm assuming Chief Weingartner will find you for the wine, so be nice to the microphone. Anyway, so our next question. Business and large industry will benefit from the state's surplus budget. What is being done to benefit the average Kansas citizen with this excess revenue? Beyond sales tax reduction on food, what specific programs can you highlight for us today? And Senator Tyson.
I'll be glad to start. We had several pieces of legislation that passed the Senate, and the House was willing to negotiate with us on it that help individuals. And some of that we were able to get in 2239. And one of a major one that we've been trying to get for many years now is a property tax freeze for low-income seniors and disabled veterans. It's not property tax through the local government freezing it. It's a refund through state government. There's controversy as to whether that's the best way to do it or not, but that's where we landed, and the governor is going to sign that bill. There were several tax items in it. Another one is, are you guys aware that you pay shipping? You pay sales tax, state sales tax on delivery and postage. Were you aware of that? Some of you were. We've removed that. We've exempted that. So that helps the average person. It adds up. Every bit adds up. The other thing is manufacturer rebates on vehicles. Kansas, we paid sales tax on that a few years ago. We were able to sunset it. It was a 3-year sunset. Then last year we sunset that again. It was a 3-year sunset. We've removed it now. So those of you that are lucky enough to be able to buy new vehicles, you will not pay sales tax on the manufacturer's rebate. You may not think that impacts you, but it does. Whether you're the one buying the vehicle or not, there's people that will cross the state line to avoid that sales tax. So we keep those sales in the state of Kansas, help our vendors, which helps our economy and helps everyone in Kansas. There were several other items in here. One of them is manufacturer's rebate. I was told there were over 29 tax items in that bill. Now let me tell you the reason that happened. It sounds horrible, but what happened was we weren't getting very many tax bills above the line in the Senate. The House wasn't getting any tax bills, and I could see this happening, so we started putting bills together in tax committee. We'd put 3 and 4 bills, And then when it got to the Senate floor, we would add 3 or 4 more bills to it. So overall, it's got some really good tax policy in there. You may not, it didn't impact this area so much, but the fires that happened in central and western Kansas, they have to replace all that fencing material and everything. So we exempted sales tax on fencing material, and also allow, when you have a disaster, natural disaster with your home, the county commissioners have the option to remove or abate property taxes for a destroyed property. They could not do that for commercial or agriculture property. Now, with this bill passing, it allows local county commissioners to decide whether they abate property taxes during a natural disaster that's been destroyed. It's just common sense legislation. So I could go over it, but I don't want to take up all the time. There's too many pieces in there. But we do
29.
have, I know, we have another tax bill coming. I'm very anxious. In fact, I was disappointed we weren't able to finish. We found out there's extenuating circumstances. People were leaving the chamber. I'll take this opportunity to tell you guys, in 12 years that I've been in the legislature, I have never missed one day of session. To me, I am completely committed to you. You have elected me to be there to represent you, and that's what I do. So we have another tax bill coming that is even better. It eventually, gradually removes state income tax on Social Security. It removes the cliff on Social Security, so that $75,001, there's no longer a cliff. The other thing it does is it attempts to, it's a gradual buy down of income tax on retirement accounts. There are things in there that for individuals. The other thing, one thing that I think is wonderful, the Senate had passed a standard deduction increase of 10%. Last year, the House brought to us an increase of the standard deduction of $500, which was a great idea. Every Kansan that is paying income tax gets some relief. The Senate, we expanded on that this year. We attempted the 10%. Some legislators weren't comfortable with the fiscal note. It was approximately $91 million. So we agreed to put in an equation based off the federal state income tax. I asked them if they would accept that equation. So what happens now, every year, your standard deduction increases based off of the IRS inflation numbers. So it's, again, common sense, good legislation. And hopefully we'll be able to get that passed. We need to, it's in the conference committee report, 2597.
I'll go next. I guess, can you clarify, business and large industry will benefit from the state surplus budget? What is that based on?
It's just a question.
It's a premise, then a question. Let's talk about what this budget does for Kansans. We have legislation this year to expand the Kansas Promise Act so that Kansas students can go to community college and have that education paid for if they're willing to stay here and work in Kansas. We've already spent $5.5 million. The program would expand under legislation being considered right now. We put $1.25 billion into the state's public retirement system. $1.25 billion to get it over 80% funded for the first time since teachers were added to the program. That will save the state $77 million a year in debt financing for CAPERS, because we've bonded money into CAPERS to try to keep it solvent. And we will pay down those debts, and we will save the average taxpayer money every year because there won't need to be that big a debt payment made. We see an increase of $80 million in home and community-based services waivers and spending on human services over what the governor recommended in her budget, in the budget passed by the House and Senate. So that's more money to our most vulnerable Kansans, those in the IDD population. We've added staff to the Medicaid Inspector General's office to make sure that people are not victims of fraud and to make sure that they get the coverage that they deserve. We put $40 million in to the State Housing Commission for investments in low-income housing across the state, particularly in rural areas. We've added affordable housing tax credits and housing investor tax credits that at maturity will put over $100 million per year into stimulating moderate income housing across the state, particularly multifamily, for families making, a family of four making between $40,000 and $115,000 to help stimulate housing growth in areas where it's needed. We've added a rural home loan guarantee program. We've changed the rules on sales approach for appraisals in rural areas where homes often can't get enough financing, enough appraisal value to get financing so that people can move into a home in rural areas. We've added the Rural Housing Incentive District to economically distressed areas, including in Shawnee and Wyandotte counties, to help with development areas that are economically distressed where incomes are low. All of those are programs that were done this year in the face of the surplus that we were given. And in addition, we've put $500 million into a rainy day fund to protect against future natural disasters or economic downturns. So when I ask you about the premise in that question, I guess I'm confused about where it's coming from. It seems fairly biased because most of the programs we've been working on have an impact on the lives of average Kansans and Kansans who are struggling economically, and that's where the focus has been in this legislative session.
I think I would add on the standard, I don't know if you touched on the $40,000 we're up in 20 to 40. I was listening to the
Oh,
tax
I did
office.
not. There were so many tax items.
That
Yeah.
one, see, I listened in. I'm not on a tax committee, so I listened in to see. And I bragged about the process earlier. For somebody like me, as a rank and file, it's a little bit frustrating because there were about apparently 29 different bills or more or less that combined. So it's hard for some of us to keep up on each one individually. But it sounds like there's still potential that for residential homeowners, the first 20,000 right now.
That passed.
It did pass?
Yes, and I can explain it.
Yeah, if you would, please.
Yeah, it's property tax relief for homeowners. What happened is 1997 is there was a statute passed on the 20 mil that you pay for K through 12, the first 20,000 valuation is exempted. The Senate had passed a bill that exempted the first 65,000 instead. And the House wasn't comfortable with that position. We didn't want to lose it, so we negotiated, and we came up with what I think is a really good negotiation. It's instead of 20,000 exempted, it's 40,000 exempted, and it has a multiplier based off of inflation and valuation increases each year that will continue to increase. Again, it's not a lot of money, but it is, every bit helps. Every bit helps, and property taxes are one of the biggest issues that we hear about. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yep, thank you.
That was in 2239.
Thank you.
Yep.
I thought that one was important. The two that are still in play, hopefully, as we move forward, I try to keep it simple for the average Kansas citizen, as this thing suggests, but the standard deduction for income taxes, it sounds like there's still a chance that may go up, has not yet, along with the sales tax reduction on food. A couple things that it does not look like we're going to get to, but for property taxes and local property taxes, the local ad valorem tax reduction, I think would help local communities, help reduce the property tax burden for everybody, including working families, others that are younger, trying to keep those in our community. And then another one that's not directly taxes, but we've talked about in the past, but it doesn't look like Medicaid expansion will go anywhere this session, that would help our rural hospitals with uncompensated care and some other things. So other than that, I think they've covered most of them already. Thanks.
Good, yes. And so our last question, and then we'll take a question from the audience. And before we take a question from the audience, now that the Kansas legislature is on the other side of first adjournment, I think, 10 days out or so, what is the outcome of allocating additional funding? Both of you, or I think all three of you brought up housing and some type for rural housing development, middle income housing development for Franklin County and the cities located within Franklin County. What does that look like for us? I think Representative Finch brought it up. I think all of you brought it up, actually. So
I can
who would
start
like
on
to
that.
address
I've
it?
been working on this on the House side. We had a plethora of bills on housing in both chambers this year, and the Speaker kind of said, hey, would you take all these and wrangle them and come up with the direction we ought to go on housing this year? And so Senator Olson had some bills on tax credits, and there were some bills on the House side that dealt with budget Here's what we know. We know there are two programs in the state arsenal that do the most good for housing development and incentivizing housing, and that's the moderate income housing program that I talked about earlier, because it covers such a wide swath of incomes. And we had a moderate income program here in Ottawa. It's the duplexes up by Lincoln School that have been built, a very nice development. And those typically require local approval. They apply through the state then, and they get that MIH designation, and they're able to build with some incentive to do that. The other is the Affordable Tax Credit Program. The Affordable Tax Credit Program has been, to date, a strictly federal program. It's about $7.5 million in new credits each year, and those are 10-year credits, so they stack. So essentially $75 million a year or so in credits that come into Kansas. We've never had a companion state tax credit on the affordable side, which would really turbocharge that credit and make it a lot more attractive for developers to come in and spend money to do housing. So we have adopted now a state mirror credit on the Affordable Housing Tax Credit Program, and that really allows us to do some low-income housing and target that segment. And that's really what every housing study that we're seeing across the state is telling us. We're lacking in that middle income and low income housing that people need. Kind of workforce housing is where we need help. And so those two programs are big in the housing bundle that will be coming to us through the Senate. I think it's in a House shell, so you guys will act on it first, and then we'll get it. And in addition, we've wrapped in that home loan guarantee program. There's an older structures tax credit. Normally, you have to be on the historic register. This allows you to take any building that's older than 50 years and apply for a tax credit to revamp any downtown building that may not be on the register but may need some help. And what we know is with those, we end up seeing a lot of second and third story residential development in city centers. So that program's in there. The RHID piece is in there. There's a tax credit for childcare in there as well. And then we've put $40 million just straight up into the State Housing Trust Fund, which is managed by the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, and that can be for additional housing development. We have a rather large economic development project out in Dodge City that's going to need housing. They're building a cheese factory out there, and they have ancillary dairies around. It's about $600 to $800 million in capital investment in western Kansas, which we haven't seen on that scale in a long time. So there's a raft of programs that will be able to hit different target markets in different areas, and we've seen both low-income housing tax credit programs here in Franklin County, and we've seen moderate income programs here. And in fact, we had two competing for the last MIH program here, and both would have been great projects. And now I think we'll have a much better chance of being able to say, yes, we want both of your projects, and they can both qualify.
Yes, and the Senate did caucus on it, and there's actually a problem. I hope that they'll go back and take a look at that legislation in the CCR. The Senate Tax Conference Committee has the child care tax credit in it, and it's actually a better version than what was negotiated in Fed and state. That's part of the problem up there. There's a reason that you have certain committees working certain issues, and when you start throwing tax and other topics, and this started years ago before current leadership. I know when I was a freshman in the Senate, my first term, they had a gun bill going through Ways and Means. I mean, there's a reason that bills go through the topic committee, because you do have individuals that understand the issues. They've been working on them for a couple of years, and they know. So hopefully we can get that worked out. If we pass both of them, I'm not sure where that lands. So
I don't have anything to add, Sarah.
Okay. I think are we working on the mic, or the mic is good? The mic is good, okay.
It is on.
Lewis has got the microphone. If you have questions, please just raise your hand, and I know he will hurriedly get to you. What's the question?
I'm going to break the rule as far as not making comments and only asking questions. I want to take this opportunity for a happy note. I would like to congratulate and thank, on behalf of AARP and myself, Senator Tyson and Representative Samsel for voting yes on the Advanced Practice Nurse Bill. It's something that people haven't heard a lot about, but it will make a dramatic impact over time on health care for all Kansans. So I congratulate you on that. We're waiting for the governor to sign it. So from AARP and myself, thank you very much.
All right, let's remember the rules. You do need to ask a question, and now we can't give you the microphone again, so, but what do you got for us, Sandy?
I am an ARNP in the first class that was conducted in the state of Kansas. Had my own practice and a collaborating with a physician. And Dennis just told me this morning that that was on. I think one of my things, I'm sure those of you who are local realize we don't have or haven't had much of a newspaper to keep us up to date. And maybe I'm just not knowledgeable on, are there newsletters from the House and the Senate of things I should be watching for? Do you put them out? Are there places online I should look? But recently I do get the Kansas City Star once in a while, and it came to my attention about some amendments to our Constitution, which I don't know how many are upset about it as I am, but to put amendments to our Constitution that has been around for a long time, and to run them through in a primary, do you realize how many voters could possibly be missed? There are over 1 million voters who are independent.
They still get a ballot.
They still get a ballot.
They can still come and vote on the constitutional.
But they have to
amendment.
request it, right?
No.
No.
They'll still get a ballot
Yes.
mailed or otherwise?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That was one of the things.
Yes.
First of all, I disagree with every one of them.
And, well, and I'll tell you, we've had constitutional amendments on the primary before. In fact, I think the boat constitutional amendment was in the primary, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
There's been several.
Well, I think probably in regards to the checks and balances of the legislator with the governor, I think that goes back to mask and mandates for vaccines. Sarah, do you have a comment?
Well, I'm just wondering, do you have a question about constitutional stuff, or do you have a question about getting information? Where's your question at?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm coming. Anyhow, I'll go to the last one because it was with judges and that followed the Constitution and women's rights and abortion rules. I don't know how aware you are of some of the needs for abortion, and I'm saying safe abortion. If that goes through, safe abortions are gone. It doesn't mean abortions are gone. And I know that there are a lot of people that don't know that these are coming up and the whole facts behind them. So I need to know how you all feel about that amendment, especially.
I can start if you want me to. We've talked about the value of them both amendment previously, and just a note about constitutional amendments. The Kansas Constitution has been amended 98 times since it was adopted, 98 times. This is not the U.S. Constitution with only 27 amendments. We're almost 100 years younger, and we've amended ours 3 times more, 3.5 times more than at the federal level. So it is not uncommon to amend the Kansas Constitution and put that question before the voters to decide. And ultimately, all of those amendments have to be passed by the voters. So it is a decision they make. The value of them both amendment came out of a Kansas Supreme Court case, Hodes v. Nauser, or Hodes and Nauser, that found that there was an inherent right to abortion in the Kansas Constitution. More than that, they found there's an inherent right to what's called bodily autonomy in the Kansas Constitution. And we really haven't tested that yet to find out how broad that is. Does that include a right to assisted suicide? Does that include a right to utilize drugs? Does that include a right to engage in sex work? All of those things, if you have an inherent constitutional right, it would trump a statutory prohibition. Over the last couple of decades, Kansas has passed over 20 enactments on abortion. All of them have been bipartisan. They include clinic safety regulations, parental notification for minors, and those kinds of things. In Hodes, the ban was on dismemberment abortion. That's what went up to the Kansas Supreme Court. That was the issue they were deciding. And so the amendment simply states that the legislature has the ability, there is no inherent right to abortion in the Kansas Constitution, and the legislature can regulate in that area. We go back to what the understanding was pre-Hodes versus Nauser. It does not affect federal decisions. It does not affect Roe v. Wade. It does not affect U.S. constitutional interpretations. It does not outlaw abortion. It simply states that there is no inherent right to that in the Kansas Constitution, and the legislature can regulate in that area. So it restores us to the pre-Hodes and Nauser understanding of what the law was. And that's what it is. I've supported it. I continue to support it. I don't think that the court should decide unilaterally that a right exists in a constitution that's 150 years old that no one at the time understood to be there. That's a stretch of an interpretation, and it includes far more than abortion. And that's what troubles me, as much as the life question is the question of what else is included in the notion of a right to bodily autonomy, because many of our laws regulate bodies and what can be put in them, what can be done to them, and just the examples I've given earlier. So that is a frightening case in terms of what the scope could be. You could begin to see prisoners using that right of bodily autonomy to challenge their incarceration, and all manner of other legal challenges to it. So that's that one.
Yeah, and I absolutely support it. It gives voters the right to decide. We had a state Supreme Court that overreached in simpler terms. They were legislating from the bench, and that is not what we need in the state of Kansas or anywhere in the United States. I absolutely support the amendment and support the right for voters to decide.
Yeah. As a legal matter, when the time the Constitution was written, it seems hard to think that the people of Kansas would have thought that that language that's in the Constitution meant that there was a right there. So that's what this question enables the people of Kansas to decide, because it is our Constitution and it's an extremely important document. But to be clear, there is equal opportunity for everybody in Kansas, regardless of party affiliation or if they're independent, whatever the case may be, but to fully campaign on the issue, go out, share their passions, recruit others, but to show up and vote in August, and hopefully it will be a strong turnout so that we can get an adequate representation from Kansas as to what the people of Kansas want on this issue and any others that we might have on there before the session concludes.
I have several questions. My name is Marcia, and I don't.
Just for the closed captioner, will you
I'm
please, yeah, you have to talk in so
Okay.
the closed captioner can get it. Yes, that's okay.
Number one, I do want to make a statement, and I read this on the, and this is just straight GOP. I don't know what your areas are, but Roger Marshall comes out on the Judge Jackson and says, quote, he will not vote for her because he fears she will not protect the Constitution and our Kansas values. Now, I want to know what he's calling our Kansas values and why he's embarrassing Kansans by making these statements.
Ma'am,
This
you'd have
was-
to ask Senator Marshall.
Yeah, that's a
We don't
Senator
serve in the
Marshall
U.S.
question.
Senate. We're in the
You're
Kansas
GOP,
legislature.
right?
We're in the state Senate.
I know.
We're here to answer
And they
questions
are our
about the state
senators.
legislature.
Oh, you don't want to answer for him? Okay, that's fine. I do have another question. Do you have a map showing what you've redrawn for the redistricting? I've been unable to find a copy of that.
It's on
I've looked online.
kslegislature.org.
I've looked for it. I can't find
If you
it.
search on KLRD, Kansas
I've been
Legislative Research Department, KLRD redistricting, all the maps are on there.
They're also on
Which one is it that
kslegislature.org.
you're going with now? What's the new one?
Was it Liberty
They're all
3?
on kslegislature.org.
Yeah, they're all there, but
if
it
you
doesn't
know
say
the
which
bill
one the
numbers.
current one is and which one is in legislation, the first one?
Do you know what the name of your map was? Was it Liberty 3?
I don't, but you can look up the bill numbers.
At
That's how I look them up.
Astra 1 or 3 was the first one, which threw Lawrence into the
But we can get you the
first-
links after the meeting.
Yes.
Can you do that? I'd
Absolutely.
like to see the map that you're looking at now.
And there's several maps that you have to remember.
Which one are you looking at to put through?
We can get you the link
They've all
to
passed.
each map that has
I've
passed,
seen 'em.
and it's now before the governor.
Which
So if-
one is it, do you know?
We can narrow it down and give you each one, yes.
Yeah.
Each one has a separate name that's passed.
There's a map for House districts, there's a map for Senate districts, there's a map for State Board of Education districts, there's a map for
Okay.
U.S. congressional districts. There's 4 different maps, actually. But we can help get you to that website so you can see them.
Okay, is it still in litigation? Is it still, or is this current one?
Only
in-
the congressional map is in litigation
The
right now in
congressional
Wyandotte
map,
County.
okay.
Yep.
Then also on taxation, you need to take a look at the taxes, quote taxes, not just something for,
Oh, I'd love to address this.
Yeah.
it needs to be taken care of.
What is
Kansas is the 9th highest taxed state in the country, and the 3rd highest taxed state in the country for retirees. Now, that is wrong. And if we're paying for Brownback's problems, which I assume is what you're talking about over here, then that's wrong. Why should we be paying for Capers if he made those choices and borrowed the money? I'm sorry, I think we need to take
actually
some
incorrect.
major looks at
Yeah,
these
may I-
things.
Yeah, I think that we're going to let Senator Tyson talk, and thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, that's actually incorrect information. The Capers issue has been going on for over 25 years. That was not the result of previous administration. That was unfunded liability, bringing people into the system without having the resources or the commitment with the system. There are a lot of problems with Capers over the years. So what you said, tax, the highest tax in the nation. I have been fighting diligently to lower taxes. What is amazing is, and I'm going to go into a little bit of history here, the 2012 tax cuts, what are labeled the Brownback tax cuts, if that was not what happened with the Kansas economy, it was larger than that. It was the perfect storm. So the tax cuts, Governor Brownback actually proposed a ratchet down, not to cut the taxes all at once. But the Senate ripped it all out, and I wasn't in the Senate at the time, and built up a very hefty tax legislation bill cut. So it was all or nothing. They passed it, governor signed it, but you go to 2013, and as conservative as I am, I was like, we need to freeze taxes at that point, but we didn't. We continued to cut. In 13, did you know this? There were continued tax cuts in 13, 14, did you know that? 15, did you know that? Most people don't know this. 16, continued tax cuts. 15 was the largest sales tax increase, but there were continued income tax increases or cuts. Along that timeline, continued budget increases. So you were outspending what you were bringing in for tax revenue. So you have that going on. And then the third component of the perfect storm was the Kansas economy. Our three major industries, agriculture, oil and gas, and aeronautics, all three of those industries took a major hit with the economy. So you had, I did not vote for those tax increases. In 2017, I don't know that they did, and I know they didn't vote for the 2015 because you weren't even in the legislature, and I know you voted no,
Yeah.
because we both voted no on it. So, ma'am, I'm sorry, your information's not accurate. And then in 2017, the largest tax increase ever in the state of Kansas. And that was, to me, it was unnecessary, and look where we're at now. We're collecting billions of dollars over revenue estimates. And part of that is COVID money, federal money that's coming in. We've got a one-time shot on this money, so we need to be very smart about how we're spending that money. It's one time, so we take care of the highest debt possible. You don't pay down your low debt because we're looking at inflation. I mean, it's just smart financial investment. But then you look at what we did this year, tax programs that cut gradually, and they are receptive to the economy. So it's going to help Kansans in the long run. It's smart policy. This is some of the best tax policy. In fact, the ranking Democrat on the Tax Commerce Committee told me he has never seen such good tax policy and such good results in 1 year alone. And
And
thank you.
I'll back you up, because the fiscal note on this bill that just passed, $90 million a year, $90 million a year. The food sales tax elimination and the $250 mini stimulus checks the governor wanted to send out are over $850 million. It's bigger than the Brownback tax cuts. The tendency of executives facing reelection is that they want to cut big taxes in a big way so they can make a splash and get reelected, and that's regardless of Republican or Democrat. And part of our job is to hold the line on that and say, no, you can't do that. And you have people up here who have all taken tough votes to have fiscal sanity and to say, let's have reasonable tax and spending policy. And that's what this is. $90 million to get $40 million in property tax reduction, to get a whole host of other tax reductions that are helpful, is measured and reasonable tax policy. Cutting $850 million plus out of an $8 or $9 billion budget for a campaign gimmick is not.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with that. I actually went to the governor when she was first elected. We need to do an oversight, a deep dive blue ribbon study on tax. It hasn't happened since the Grave administration.
No.
I asked this governor in good faith to help me out to do this. Instead, she formed a tax committee that promotes her policy. It's not a deep dive study on tax. I'll tell you, a deep dive study on tax, when she did form that committee, I went out, you guys have heard me say this, I went out across the state, got stakeholders on property tax. We came up with a list of items on how do we fix the property tax system. We couldn't pull the rug out from under local governments. They are funded, a majority of their funding is either, it's either sales tax or property tax, and the schools also. So we knew that we didn't have the resources or the ability to pull the rug out from underneath them. We didn't want to do that. So instead, we landed on transparency in property tax. So now you will know who is raising your property taxes, and you'll know why. And that is what we are based on as a nation. Taxation with representation. It's amazing, but that model has worked in Utah and Tennessee for over 30 years. It will work in Kansas also. We've got to get the kinks worked out. It's a new system, but it will work in Kansas. Louis?
Dennis George, healthcare question today. As we look at our healthcare shortages moving forward, our healthcare workers were praised 2 years ago. Now we're almost the evil empire, and we're seeing shortages. Your workforce issues, Representative Finch, thank you for looking at the issue for our junior colleges. But when we look at common sense, that's what I'm hearing this year out of our legislators. Both Samsel and Mr. Finch, you were great for protecting the interruption for healthcare workers to make it a felony, because our healthcare workers have been very hurtful with patients and being abused. Senator Tice, thank you for Wilson County to allow them to do an EMS tax to help to get people in place to provide services. As we move forward, as we've had with medical scholarships with physicians, could we expand some of the credits to help workers stay in our rural communities more than we have in the past? We've done some great work with the rural tax credits, but what ways can we expand for education and tax support for educational opportunities to do grants to help us get our education back, to get our workforce up? Because we're short in labs, we're short of nurses, we're short of healthcare workers across the board, as well as electricians and housekeepers. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts moving forward with such great legislation, and also the fact that we have a lot of county hospitals that are in capers, and that putting the money, our one-time money, in to balance it to 80% was great. So what things can we do look forward with this common sense legislator this year on how we can increase our workforce? And that's all industries when we look past 81 in western Kansas.
Yes, well, one of the best pieces of legislation, you guys might know it as Senate Bill 155, where high school students could take technical courses, and that would include medical. We need to expand it so that it's computer, nursing, all of those. They can come out with a degree and work as a high school graduate. One of the things that we had this year was an aviation tax credit for education. I tried to get healthcare included in that. I could not get the momentum to get the majority to support it. They've seen the aviation tax credit for a couple of years now, and they were comfortable with it. I'm hoping that next year we can come back and have individuals like yourself and legislators working to try to include healthcare industry also in those education tax credits. The HOPE Act that was passed, I know Representative Finch knows much about that program. Senator Baumgardner worked on it. Those are programs that provide scholarships for individuals to attend healthcare or other degrees, and it's a great program. One of the things that I've done is reached out to Osawatomie State Hospital and KU. We're trying to connect those two so that we could get a working relationship like we see with the KBI and Washburn and other. I mean, it's just smart business going forward. And so the Rural Opportunity Zone, you may not realize about it. Yeah, I was able to, and thankfully the House accepted the offer. We extended that program for another 5 years. People may not realize, I wish it was statewide. I'll just be very candid with you. I think if we have a program, it should be good for everyone. But it is a program in the rural counties, and thankfully I was able to get Franklin in. That took a lot of effort, but we got Franklin and Miami in. And it allows people moving from out of state to be have an income tax abatement for 5 years, up to 5 years. And people do not realize the biggest users of that are our hospital healthcare systems and our education system. So it does help rural communities.
It's just a few things I would add to that. One of them, in our education committee, we spent quite a bit of time on the CTE program, so getting career tech back into our schools and promoting that as best we can in our schools. Another one's competitive pay, so that we're not losing workers across state lines in other areas. So we did a 5% pay increase for our state workers. And then the third one, that's maybe not directly, but there's a lot of increase of violence and other issues of how we treat one another, whether it's at the hospital, the grocery store, or wherever else. Maybe some of that's still from the pandemic, but anyway, how we treat one another matters. So I think we've done a much better job setting the tone in Topeka of working together. That's not always how it comes across in the newspaper articles, unfortunately, or some of the other media you might see. But we've done a much better job of working with one another. A lot of the bills we've passed are often bipartisan in overwhelming numbers. Those usually don't get the headlines because they don't get as many clicks or revenue, perhaps. But we've been doing a very good job of trying to set a tone of we're all Kansans, we're in this together, working together, and hopefully that starts to trickle down when we do go out and work with one another in society, because we do all have to work together and get along with one another. But those would be the three things I would add.
Yeah, you're really touching on the question of kind of rural depopulation in Kansas, and it's the most vexing question.
I didn't want to be negative.
No,
because I just drove from our district tour from Garden City through Scott City, and over 11 years, the buildings downtown that used to have thriving businesses are empty. So I don't like to use the word depopulation, but it is a challenge because when we're recruiting a professional, we're recruiting a pair.
Right.
Whoever their partner is, we're looking for 2 jobs, not 1.
You know, and it's the thing I wish we could have a deep dive on at the state level. And you look at states that are doing things well, and by well, I mean if the metric is are people moving there. You look at a state like Tennessee. A lot of people are moving to Tennessee. Tennessee has the Promise Act. They've expanded it several times. You know, and we, for me, when I proposed that the first time, it was look around and see what states that are growing population are doing, and how do we, you know, copy that, improve on that, and get people to come to Kansas, because that ultimately is what we need. And so, you know, as you said, the pandemic has been absolutely brutal for our healthcare workers. I think I would speak for all of us in saying thank you to our doctors and our nurses and our lab techs and our pharmacists and the people who do cleanup in hospitals and are exposed and at risk every day dealing with this pandemic. And you can say, yeah, that's what they all signed on to do, but it's been some heroic efforts on their part, and you know, we're all in their debt and appreciate that. We're going to have to figure out what industries lend themselves to being in rural areas. Now remote work has become a reality for many people. Broadband's going to have to catch up. The state has a lot of broadband money. and the governor's point person on broadband just left a month ago. So we're kind of starting over in terms of what they were building. But the question is, and what really ought to be happening around the table is, do we do this like a highway program? Are there regions in the state and we're going to take finalists for projects and do it that way? Or do we do it kind of, let's create the backbone? We have some interconnectivity through CanRen, but do we need more? How do we get this out into rural areas? And the reality is that fiber to the home is probably not feasible the old way that we did the Kansas Universal Service Fee and ran twisted copper lines down every country road, to the house at the end of the drive. But we'll have to do something, because that's what young people are going to expect. That's what young professionals are going to expect. Can I sit at home as a doc and look at that imagery and make that assessment? Or am I going to have to drive to the hospital because I don't have fast enough internet? I can't get enough bits down the tube to be able to look at that image and make a diagnosis. RAWs, tax credits, first-time home buyer program. I mean, like the show Northern Exposure, we literally have a program now in Kansas where a small community could all save state tax deferred to build up for a first-time home buyer to come to town and buy a house, for a dentist or a doc or an APRN to come in and say, hey, we'll cover that first $50,000 of your home price, so you can come here and establish your practice. So, KU Med has obviously expanded across the northern tier of counties, and trying to push out. I know the legislature does a lot for KU Med, and trying to do a lot for our community hospitals too. We have a tax credit. Senator talked about all the tax credits. We have a tax credit for donors to tech and community colleges. Anything we can do to help facilitate that transfer from school to training to workforce and get people to want to stay here in Kansas, we're trying to work on. We have a bill this year that eliminates liability for school districts for internships. So a child goes out and works in an environment, it's establishing where the liability should be for that and making sure that businesses aren't afraid to bring a high school student on board to do an internship because they're going to get sued. But we have to make sure that the child's protected as well. So all of those kinds of things go into this matrix of how we get and keep people here. And I think you saw with the APRN bill, Judy, to your point, that, I had some process issues with that bill. It had never been heard on the House side. There were some concerns raised legally about what it actually did, because the scope of practice for nurses is enmeshed in state regulations and statutes, and it's not really clearly defined. Did the bill do anything other than give prescriptive authority? We can all agree we probably don't want to see the collaborative practice agreements, that those are burdensome and can be financially prohibitive for an APRN to practice, but trying to find the best way forward. And unfortunately, the group's kind of deadlocked and we couldn't get them to a compromise that made sense. So hopefully this works the way they intended it to, but I have doubts, and I think we'll be back here trying to fix some of that. And I kind of put on my medical hat and said, first, do no harm. I didn't want to pass a bill that I thought would get people sued. So overall, I like the concept. I think we need more access to health care, and the collaborative practice agreements needed to go away. But we want to make sure we get resources out into the rural areas of our state as best we can, and whether it's housing, whether it's health care, whether it's jobs. If you've got the solution, we're all ears.
I'm Linda Alderman, and I have kind of a down-in-the-weeds question. As a poll worker, when the August primary comes up, will independents be able to just vote on the amendments without declaring a party? Is there a separate ballot for the amendments?
Yes. They will
Okay.
be able to come in and just vote the amendments without declaring a partisan affiliation.
Okay, great, thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, I have one more question for you. And in light of KU's victory on Monday night, I wanted to address sports wagering. And the sports wagering bill coincidentally appeared under the dome just about the same time that March Madness started. And I know that there were some robust conversations had in conference committee, and a fund was proposed that would be administered by the State Finance Council, that would be designated to attract future professional sports teams to Kansas. That bill did pass the House, and now I believe it's on its way to the Senate, or has gotten to the Senate. Can you tell us about your position on this bill, and what are the pros and cons of sports wagering in Kansas?
We could probably start on the House side since the senator hasn't seen it yet.
Yes.
So, Mark, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
You can go for it.
So I think it's now Senate Bill 84 is the vehicle that the sports wagering bill is in. Let's start with the last part of your question, good and bad to sports wagering. Good is it's going to be some revenue for the state. It's already happening in many of the states around us. It's already happening online for many people. To think that sports wagering is not happening in Kansas, you got to really kind of close your eyes to what's going on. I mean, the folks who support other vices would say the same thing, right? It's back when Franklin County was a dry county. We all knew that there were people who knew how to find alcohol. So sports wagering's the same way, and then again it goes on. The bad is that it, like other gambling, can lead to addiction. There can be a societal cost to that, to treat people who are addicted to gaming. And now use that to back into the conversation about the bill. So Kansas has 4 state-owned casinos. They're operated by people who have a contract with the state, 4 different operators around the state, but the lottery essentially owns all of the casinos in Kansas. And so the great debate was, if we do sports wagering, who will do it and who will get the revenue from it? And they had, on the one hand, people who said, well, the lottery should do it because then the state will make more money. And you had other people saying, no, we should run it through the casinos because they know how to do that. The House bill, or the conference committee bill, I should say, ended up letting the casinos run it, which means less revenue for the state. We're probably only looking at about $8 to $10 million in revenue to the state per year, so not a lot. But sports wagering is not nearly as lucrative as table games or slot machines. There's a very small fraction of each bet that a casino or an operator makes on that. So we decided the lottery wanted something, the governor wanted something called iLottery, which would essentially allow you to play a slot machine or card games on your phone every day, and we rejected that and felt that the risks of that were much greater than a discrete bet on a sporting event, whereas you could open a slot machine on your phone, and I mean, we all see those apps, but you're not playing for real money. This would be playing for real money, casino games on your phone. So that was the second big hurdle that had to get over. The governor's office finally receded from that position when they realized it would kill the bill, and we went forward without iLottery in there. So the casinos would operate it. The revenue would come $8 to $10 million to the state. The first $750,000 would go into a white-collar crimes unit because there is organized crime around sports wagering, and this would allow for the future attorney general, whoever that is, to be able to prosecute white-collar crimes related to sports wagering. Another chunk will go into the problem gaming fund. Right now we have about $10 million in the problem gaming fund in our state, and they only spend about $700,000 a year. So they're not spending it all. It goes back to your point, we probably need more addiction therapists and more ability to push out those funds to help serve people. But if it goes into effect, then the rest of the money, up to 80%, would then go into a fund to help attract national sports teams to Kansas. You heard Mark Donovan, president of the Chiefs, talk about wanting the Chiefs accepting offers from developers to potentially come to Kansas. Of course, the Royals are talking about moving to a downtown stadium. And so this would allow a dedicated source of money to be able to be used to help attract a national team to Kansas. We have Sporting Kansas City right now, our national soccer team, and we have NASCAR racing going on, but we don't have baseball or football or basketball or hockey on the Kansas side. And this allows us to kind of try to be competitive in that world and see if we can attract a team here.
Blaine did a great job. I would add this is probably the number one issue I hear about when I'm out among the district or at basketball games, something like that. Everybody wants to know where sports wagering is at. So I'm optimistic as it's now gone over to the Senate. We had some late night or early morning. I'm not sure which it was by the time we got done with it, but we did get it passed barely. It did create some controversy. It was, I think, maybe a process issue as to the attracting the professional sports team. So that's something that'll get looked at further in the Senate, and then when it gets back, so hopefully that'll be negotiated and hammered out between the Senate and the House, but I was happy to support it, and hopefully we get it to the governor for her to sign.
Well, thank you. I haven't seen the bill. It did come late at night when we're working on several other conference committee reports, and the tax conference committee, we were meeting until late at night, 2 a.m., and everybody, not everybody, you guys were still there, I saw your vehicle, but majority of people had gone home. So my focus definitely was tax, and when the legislation comes in front of me, I'll take a very diligent look. In fact, get an opportunity to read it over the break. I am going to touch on food sales tax just real quick. I know that it's been talked about. We've tried to pass it for several years. And in 2019, it was in 2 tax bills. The governor vetoed both of those. If she would not have vetoed those, sales tax on food would be completely removed next year. It would have been at 1.5 this year, but she did veto those. So that's where we're at. So the tax conference committee took a hard look at this. The House made a really good proposal. I liked it. In fact, I wish I didn't have a majority of the conference committee that would have accepted the proposal. So it is what it is. You got to have the votes. That's all there is to it. They didn't, so we negotiated, and we came up with a really good solution for Kansans. And what it would be is it's Conference Committee Report 2106. In January 1st of 2003, it would take state food sales tax to 4%. It's 6.5 right now. The next year, it would go to 2%, and the next year, it would be at 0. And I say food, but that is a misnomer. It is groceries. It is groceries. The governor keeps saying axe the food sales tax. That's not what she's asking for. She's asking for groceries. Because the Senate did the tax committee passed out a bill that would have axed food sales tax. All food. Restaurants, everything. That's what she keeps saying. And so we gave her that. And the bill didn't go anywhere. But it would have removed all sales tax on food. It would have allowed a local option to remove sales tax on food too, because that is the ask, to remove sales tax completely. I'm excited about 2106. I think it's a good compromise, and that's what we do up there. I mean, I know people don't like that word, compromise, but that's why we have the debate. That's why we can land on good policy, and I think 2106 will be great policy for the state of Kansas. It'll be a win for all Kansans.
As our wrap-up question, before I give that to you, I want to thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. I know that oftentimes there's a lot of passion in the room, and there's a lot of love for Kansas, and that comes out in different manners. But we recognize that we can achieve peace through some calculated risk, but shared labor and moving through with some sacrifice, but know that there's lots of passion here in the room, and we recognize that, and recognize that we all love Kansas. So thank you for being here. A couple things. We did have a constituent ask about receiving information from your office. How do they receive updates? And then the second part of the wrap-up question is, and it's listed there on the very end, tell us about 2 of your biggest accomplishments that you feel like you've had so far this session, and one of your disappointments. Who would like to start?
I'll be glad to start. I email updates. I send email updates, and I send updates to the newspaper. So there is a weekly update in the newspaper. I also used to do the Capitol Minute. I'll get back to doing that at some point, but no, I like my constituents to know how I voted, why I voted, and that's why I tried to put out there. Yeah. As far as greatest accomplishments, you guys know I work very diligently on tax. I would say the conference committee reports that we passed, the 2239 is a great legislation for all Kansans. 2597, if we can get that passed into law, that is even better legislation for Kansans, especially people that are struggling. It gets rid of the first one was the one that we talked about, had the 29 bills in it. Froze property tax for seniors, disabled vets, other stuff, the property tax relief for all homeowners. The 2297, it has the standard deduction increase for individuals. It has so many good policies in it that you will see in your pocketbook. It will impact you and your lives, and that's what it'll help shrink government instead of growing it. And then 2106, if we can get that passed, that is the food sales tax bill. I have been working on that since 2012. Representative Jana Goodman introduced me to what great policy that would be. We got it passed in the House. I was in the House at that time. The Senate killed it. We've never had the House, the Senate, and the governor all asking for legislation on food sales tax. This is the year. Let's get it done, 2106. So thank you guys for all your support, and thank you for hosting this event. I know they don't just come together. It takes a lot of work, so we appreciate you. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Sarah, Lewis, our sponsors. Appreciate everybody coming out this morning, especially on a beautiful day like we've got without the wind. A couple things I think we should all be very proud of as Kansans. It received strong bipartisan support, but our budget, our chairman did excellent work on it along with his entire committee. It's sound fiscal policy that puts the state on a good track for the upcoming year, and we paid down a bunch of debt while we're in the process of it. So I think that's something we should all be proud of as we move forward. And we haven't got it done yet, but education, again, is going to be fully funded. So that's something that we're not going to be arguing about at that level. We're on a good track with our public schools. One thing we haven't got done yet, I don't know if we'll be able to, but it's got about 90% support in the district when I pulled it, but medical marijuana is one that we have not got done yet that hopefully we can. A lot of states have already moved to that, but that would help a lot of folks with some medical issues if we could get medical marijuana done.
Yeah, I think in terms of staying in touch, I'm happy to take a call or an email anytime. I used to do kind of update letters to the editor of the paper, but the paper is not really published as often anymore, and I sense there's a big decline in readership. But I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime, and I do. I have constituents who call up and say, hey, where's this or where's that, and or send an email and ask a question, and I try to get to as many of those as I can, try to get to all of them. When you get into a leadership position, you start getting emails from around the state, so you have to go through and try to pick out, okay, who are the folks, from the 59th district, from Ottawa and Franklin counties, and give them priority in trying to answer their questions. I think big accomplishments this year, CAPERS is huge. The long-term solvency of the state's pension system is incredibly important to the taxing and spending policy that we can pursue as a state, and like I said, it's $77 million a year in additional interest expense that we don't have to pay now. That's a huge savings. This housing bundle, we go back and get this done, it will be transformative for rural housing in our state. I think that will be a great game changer for housing in our state. And of course, Promise Act is one I continue to be proud of, and we have a trailer bill this year that we've been working on with Senator Baumgardner. It's going to be good. So I think in terms of disappointment, it continues to just be tone and tenor. Now, the media outlets that report on the legislature are driven by clicks and how many people will read their story, and the more contentious, the more salacious, the worse light they can put people in, the better. And so you come back to these coffees and walk around the district, and people are primed to be upset because of something they've read that's utterly slanted, is misleading, is not factual. I call it the Twitterification of communication about the legislature. And that's why I encourage you, if you have a question, call. We might disagree at the end of the conversation, but I promise you we can do it in a way that we don't hate each other, and we don't walk away going, that person's terrible. I think everybody in the room, as Sarah said, is motivated by the same thing. We love our state. We want it to be as good as it can be. We want families to be here. We want children to grow up here. We want people to have good jobs here. And we want the quality of life to be excellent. We all want that. We might disagree on the goal. We might disagree on how we get there. But if we keep that in mind in the way we communicate with each other and not let slanted coverage come in between, I think, that will be a great thing for our state. And unfortunately, I see the tone and tenor mirroring the national too often, with people lobbing bombs instead of having productive conversations. So that's a disappointment for now, and hopefully that becomes something that we reverse in our state and becomes a positive.
Okay, well, I think that wraps it up for the legislative coffee for April. We do not have another one scheduled right now, and I don't know if we're going to do one. So that will really be left up to John and the committee whether or not that happens. But we certainly appreciate your time today, and we appreciate those that have come out today, like Representative Samsel said, on a nice day that is not windy, and hope that you're out enjoying the springtime weather very soon. So look forward to hearing for more information from the Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce and the Legislative Action Committee about if there's a follow